And immediately she gave him another room there close to her chamber. And he prepared the softest fleece of a ram together with the horns from its head, and a staff and a white robe. And he made a serpent, and he made it soft and limp, and it slithered out of his hands. All of a sudden he sent the serpent loose, and it entered Olympia's bedroom. And when she saw it, she was not afraid, for she had been expecting it. And she bid those who were there to go away, each to his own place. And she reclined on the bed and covered her face. Only out of the corner of her eye did she see him assuming the appearance which she saw in the dream. And he put aside the date tree woodstaff and got up onto the bed and turned Olympias toward him and mated with her. Then he put his right hand upon her side and said, Invisible and indomitable child, long may you live, my lady, for you are pregnant with the boy child who shall be your avenger and become world-conquering king of the whole civilized universe. And having said this, he took his staff and left the room, and he hid the things he had. 14. And when it was morning, Olympias arose and came to Nectibo's room. Awakening, he asked, My lady, what is it? Tell me, did your dream come true? Olympias replied, Your words came true. And he said, I rejoice with you, my lady. And Olympias asked, Now, is he not again to come to me, as I await a wife his coming and mating with me? For I received him with loving desire, prophet, but I am surprised if this happened without your knowing, and you are not aware of it. And he rejoiced, for he was loved by the queen. He said, Listen, Olympias, I am the prophet of this god. If you will let me sleep here so that no one is disturbed or upset, I shall do the customary ablution for him, and he will come to you. And Olympias said, Let your will be done hereafter. And she said to her doorkeepers, Give him the key to that room. And when he acted, he did so secretly. And indeed he came to her as many times as Olympias desired that he come to her. Ahead of time she let her wishes be known through the prophet, and he, as was his custom, mated with Olympias, giving the illusion that he was Ammon. 15. Her stomach was swelling, and she asked, Prophet, what shall I do if Philip comes and find me pregnant? And he said, Be not afraid, my lady, for the god Ammon is helping you in this matter. He will come to him in a dream and inform him of what was destined to happen, and you are to be unreproached and unpunished by him. Now depraved Olympias carried on in this fashion, revealing her true nature through the force of magic. 16. And Nectanebo made a sea falcon and bewitched it. And as quickly as he wished, he saw Philip in his dreams. And exercising his magic on the falcon, he spoke and caused the falcon to fly. And having flown over land and sea in 2 days and 2 nights, it reached the place where Philip was and spoke to him in a dream, and as he had been taught by Nectanebo. Upon seeing the dream, Philip woke up troubled, and he summoned Babylonius, the reader of dreams, and said to him, I saw in a dream a handsome white-haired god with the horns of a ram in his beard above his jaws. And he came in the night to my wife Olympias and lay with her. And upon rising he said to her, You have conceived from me a boy child who shall fructify you and shall avenge his father's death. And I seemed to patch up the womb of my wife with papyrus and to seal it with my seal. And the ring was of gold and insignia sun-like with the head of a lion and a Janny. And this is what I thought I had done when the falcon came to me and awoke me from my sleep in his wings and gave no sign. The dream reader said to him, The dream that you saw is true, since your sealing the womb of your wife is a proof-laden oracle. For the seal is proof, indicating that your wife has become pregnant. For no one seals an empty vessel, but rather a full and loaded one, and this with papyrus. Since papyrus is found nowhere else but in Egypt, the man is Egyptian, and the seed is not vile, but distinguished and glorious and radiant, especially because of the gold, for what is more glorious than gold, with which the gods are honored. And as the seal showed the sun and had a head of a lion and lances, he who is begotten shall reach as far as the east, and act in every matter just as he pleases, according to his desires, like a lion. And he shall spear down peoples and cities on account of the spear that is in the dream. And as for you, seeing the horned, hoary god, he was the god of the Libyans, Ammon. 18. When the interpreter of dreams had finished with this explanation, Philip did not docilely hear of the pregnancy of his wife, even though he knew it was by the gods. And having won the war, he rushed back to Macedon. Meanwhile, Olympias was afraid, and Nectanebo comforted. 19. And when Philip returned and went to the queen, Olympias came to him, but on account of the above happenings. Not confidently, upon seeing her troubled, Philip said, My lady, you are not the cause of these things, but for others are to blame. And what happened was pointed out to me in a dream, so that you might be innocent and blameless. For we kings are able to do all things, but we can do nothing against the gods. For you were not smitten by any common, vulgar man, nor was anyone cheaply covetous of your beauteous form. Rather, it was the gods, who are all powerful. By having said this, he sent Olympias away in a happy frame of mind, and she was grateful to the forewarning prophet, and thereafter Philip was the Olympias. 20. Meanwhile, Nectanebos was there in the palace, but did not appear to anyone, since he did not wish to. But he heard Philip saying, You were not made pregnant by the gods, but in fact were smitten by someone else, whom I shall send forth from this life with pitiless tortures if he falls into my hands. And Nectanebos heard what was being said. 21. And while they were celebrating the king's return, only the king was sad because of his wife becoming pregnant. And while the crowd was in merriment, Nectanebos transformed himself into the form of a serpent, much bigger than the first. He passed through the palace, breathing so fiercely that even the foundations quivered, and those who saw him fled away, startled and shaken by fear. Olympias, recognizing his bridegroom, was stunned and raised her right hand from her lap and extended it. And he circled the room and then came to Olympias' knees and flicked out his double-forked tongue and kissed her. The serpent, thus with positive proof, showed the spectators his loving embrace. But Philip was both frightened and amazed, and revealed his unawareness of its coming. And since Nectanebos did not wish to be seen too much by the audience, he transformed himself from the serpent into an eagle and flew away from there. As to where he went, it is unnecessary for me to say. 22. But Philip had been terribly frightened. When he regained his composure, he said, My lady, as sure proof, I saw the god come to help you in your peril. But as to who the god was, I did not know, for he showed us the forms of Aramzad and of Ammon. Olympia said, As he revealed himself to me at the time of mating with me, he is Ammon, and the god of the Libyans. And when the king heard this, he considered himself blessed, for I am destined, he said, to be the father of a child of a god. 23. And a few days later, Philip had gone and sat in a grove in the palace where there were many birds feeding. Suddenly, while he was busy with important affairs, a bird came and laid an egg on his lap and flew away. And the egg rolled from his lap to the ground and broke open. From it a little serpent came forth and circled it many times. Then, wanting to go back into the egg from which it emerged, it struck its head on the way in and died instantly. 24. And since Philip was much troubled, he sent for Antiphonta, who was a celebrated omen teller of the time, and he told him the omen that had occurred: the bird, the egg, the serpent, its circling, its death, and its Antiphonita, because special information had been inspired in him by the will of the god, said, O king, you will have a son who, have traversed the whole world, shall subdue everyone by his strength and shall be subdued by no one. And while returning to his country, he shall die, having lived but for a short time. For the serpent is a royal animal. The egg from which the serpent emerged, like the whole world, and when it had encircled the world and wanted to enter again the place from which it had emerged, it failed to do so and died. The man interpreted the omen in this fashion and related it to him, and upon receiving presents from Philip, he departed. 25. And when the fixed birth span of 9 months of the completion of the pregnancy had come to the end, Olympias went and sat on the childbearing throne to give birth. And Nectanebo stood close by measuring the heavenly position of the stars, and then by directing the disturbed natural elements by his own power. He learned that the time was not right, and he said, "Control and restrain yourself, my lady, for the present time, and be like that person who gave you birth. For if you give birth now, your offspring will be born in servitude or as a slave to others." 26. When the woman was again impatient about having the child, for her many pains were unbearable, Nectanebo said, "Be patient a little longer, queen, for if you give birth now, your offspring will be castrated or deformed." And Nectanebo comforted the woman with consoling words, and he put his hand on her natural passageways and learned what was needed. And Nectanebo with his power prevented the birth. He looked again into the heavenly stars at the position of the natural elements, and he recognized that the whole universe was in harmony, and that Kronos had come into the middle of the sky. He saw a bolt of lightning in the sky at noon, caused by the power of the sun, and he said to Olympias, "Give forth the cry of childbirth." And he himself delivered her child and said, "If you give birth now, queen, the one you bear is a world conqueror." And Olympias cried out louder than a bull and gave birth to a boy child. 27. And when the boy fell to earth, there was an earthquake and thundering, and frequent lightning flashes appeared on the earth, while nearby the whole world trembled. And Philip said, "I do not wish to rear that one, my lady, for he is not my offspring. But since I see that your seed is from the gods and that your birth giving was accompanied by the omen of elemental occurrences, I shall rear him in the memory of my child who died, but the one who had been born to me from my first wife, and he shall be called Alexander, because Philip spoke in this fashion." The child received proper care, and there were crowning festivities through Macedon, Pella, Thrace, and throughout the nations. And so as not to linger very long on the matters for which concern the rearing of Alexander, I shall start from the beginning to tell the attentions he received. For when he was weaned and developed in size and shape, he did not resemble in the last Philip and Olympias, and not even his father, but rather he developed features of a singular type. For he had the hair of a lion, and one eye was blue, the right one was heavy-lidded and black, and the left one was blue. And his teeth were as sharp as fangs, and he looked upon a defensive attack the same as a lion would. And his personality was very clearly indicated that the boy would be like, and in time he grew up and tried his wings at learning and ruling. 29. His governess was Lecrine, the stout sister of Menelaus, and his pedagogue and tutor was Leonides, the Laconian, the teacher of songs Polynicos, and of music Leucippus, the Lemnian, of geometry Menaechmus, and the Peloponnesian, of rhetoric Anaximenes, Aristocles, and the Lampsacenian, and of